Welcome to season 8 of the award-winning Retail Tea Break podcast. My name is Melissa Moore, the retail advisor, and each week I'll be joined by industry experts, retailers and brands to dispel the myths, share their knowledge and give you an insight into the retail industry. You can listen back to previous seasons on your favorite podcast platform, and while you're there, please do hit that follow button so that you get to listen to it first every week. You can watch us, of course, over on YouTube and subscribe to The Retail Advisor because you've no idea how useful that is to ensure that I can keep bringing you the content that you love. And remember, sharing is caring in the retail industry. Please do share episodes across any of the platforms with your network. And if you're on social media, tag me, Melissa Moore, and the Retail Tea Break podcast. So, in the meantime, grab that cup of tea, sit back and listen in to season 8 of the Retail Tea Break podcast. Today, I'm joined by a guest with more than 20 years industry knowledge and experience in merchandising, buying, product development and sourcing with luxury and mass merchant retailers in both regional and global markets. She brings the end-to-end expertise that retail brands need. Clients span apparel, footwear, luxury, retail tech, and so much more. She's a respected voice on topics such as responsible and sustainable retail, the future of retail, and has led conversations on pertinent issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, she's been cited in Forbes, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Sourcing Journal, and Footwear News. Lisa Umlani, the principal and co-founder of Retail Strategy Group. Welcome to the Retail Tea Break podcast.
Thanks, Melissa. Am I allowed to drink coffee on the tea break podcast?
I'm sure you can. I don't mind this once. Do you know what? It's quite funny. I'm not a coffee drinker. Would you believe it's the only reason it
What?
has to be tea? But you go for it because I know you like your coffee.
Well,
So
cheers.
cheers indeed. Listen, delighted to have you on. Really excited to talk about the new book, and you can see it there behind you, the wholesale profitable wholesale strategies for brands. But before we get into it, in the age-old tradition of the Retail Tea Break podcast, in the time that it takes to boil a kettle, so one of those traditional kettles to make that cup of tea, which I'm told is about 2 minutes,
Ooh.
tell us a bit more about you and, of course, your amazing retail journey.
Well, I mean, you really set me up for success there. So thank you for that introduction. So I've always been in retail, fashion, and footwear specifically. I mean, I'm pretty sure I worked illegally in stores from like a young teenager, 13 years old. I was working in the mall. So, fashion has always been a part of my life. Now, I always thought I was going to be a fashion designer. So I actually started in design and then I switched in the middle of uni to fashion marketing and buying and business. And then fast forward to my first job, I actually did design, which is like odd. But my claim to fame, as I'd love to say, because it's so not me, is that I actually designed all the bags for FIFA World Cup 2002, which is a big coup right now. But, ask me if I kept any of the designs and I'll say no, because I didn't know.
No
Big
way!
deal. I didn't know anything when I was 25. Fast forward, I have 20 years of buying experience. I spent a lot of time at Ralph Lauren, Club Monaco, and also department stores. So I've kind of seen both sides of the retail world. And then in 2018, I worked with Accenture as their merchandising SME. And that's where I spent a lot of time at Nike, which was fascinating because that campus is amazing. If anyone's ever been, you can even look it up on YouTube. It's awesome. And then 2020 pandemic hits and we decided, this is a perfect time to start our own company. So we started Retail Strategy Group in November 2020. How am I doing for the kettle time?
Oh, I'd say
Good?
I'm just going to let
Okay.
it boil again because this background in the industry just is like ticking the boxes of the best and of the best out there. That expertise that you've got, that knowledge from all these incredible brands, as incredible as what you've brought to them. How amazing.
Honestly, it's been a trip. And sometimes I can't believe how much I've done and how long I've been in the industry. Because I guess when I think about today, I always feel like I'm learning something new. And I mean, to me, that's exciting. I think you should learn every single day. what else have I done? I mean, so many things. And now, of course, I've, been in, been running retail strategy group with my partner for the last 5 years. We lived in New York last year before, and I was teaching at FIT. So, like you, I understand what it means to, mold those young minds and show them that it's not so glorious to be in retail and it's a lot of work. But, I think it's such an exciting time with all the change, and we're always reinventing retail. And like you, we were at NRF together, so that was exciting. Learning, what's happening around innovation and just retailers really thinking about the customer differently. I think that's really that's what gets me excited, as you can clearly see.
And I love that because we are so similar in so many respects, and I'm definitely going to jump into a lot more of this. But what I find so interesting over even your last few years is, of course, you started Retail Strategy Group with your partner in the middle of the pandemic. So we're talking
Yeah.
about the most volatile time that retail's ever had, but also the change and the acceleration that's been coming at us over the last 5 years. Even in that small time frame, you must have seen an enormous amount of jumping around. I would say panic. I would say excitement as well, especially with the introduction of tech and AI. It's all going on.
I mean, we're seeing similar fear and wait and see approaches, and all the reactions that we saw during the pandemic, we're seeing that now, right?
Mm.
And I think what's really interesting is, as these external factors, these things that are happening in the world, how they impact retail is tremendous. But what I will say, the fundamentals of retail still apply, where, we still need to create great product, delight the customer, get to market faster with the right product at the right time, obviously. And, stop over assorting and over developing, and do things in a more efficient way. So those things still stand no matter the chaos happening around us.
I think they're really good principles as well to live by, especially when everything around us, as you say, is gone a bit bananas. But
It's
again, we'll probably
chaos.
continue to, and it'll come back and it'll be calm and it'll go again. But look, to dive right in and to talk about the real positivity here, you've written this amazing book, The Wholesale, Profitable Wholesale Strategies for Brands. What made you put pen to paper?
So, the last 5 years, especially, working with, you know, enterprise brands, large matrix brands, and also emerging brands, what I learned very, very quickly was that there's a lot of retail enthusiasts that have started brands. Think of a runner starting a running store, right? Or, I even hear it in the food and CPG business that, you have these enthusiasts starting these brands, but they don't necessarily have the fundamentals to go to market because they haven't been a retailer before. And that's okay, right? I think there's also been a misconception around DTC being more profitable than wholesale, and you should just pick one lane. Absolutely not. And working with a lot of these DTC brands in the last few years, there was a common theme that they didn't really understand the value of wholesale and how to get not only retail ready, but market ready. And that involved things like creating line sheets with them. And that's the most basic thing, right? Being a former department store buyer, I knew exactly what buyers were looking for. So I'm like, let's use that knowledge. So fast forward, we write this newsletter called The Merchant Life, and we focused on wholesaleism. So just like real, tangible things that brands could use immediately, and we put that in our newsletter. That thing went viral. So we're like, let's
Mm.
write a guide on this. So that's what prompted writing the book.
And I love the fact, and forgive me the way I even word this, it's a really easy read, as in you can
Oh, it
jump
is.
in. There's a super amount of actionable kind of takeaways in it, but it is an easy to read. There's no fancy words in here. It's not about having those, I suppose, almost foreign kind of concepts as they would be to some people, as you say, who don't know the industry.
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost like having I would say, a head of retail or a chief merchant in your pocket because everything that I would help these DTC brands with, we've actually just kind of packaged up and put in this book, including things like templates you'll need. Even a early buyer in their career could use this book to understand, okay, how should I position a brand when I'm buying it for my stores. A store owner could absolutely use this, whether you are a $1 million brand or whether you're, a 10 or $15 million brand. I think there's a lot of tangible things that you could use in here because I really took that perspective of my buying life and my merchant life to create the content in the book.
And I think on that, then you've been so fortunate to have sat on both sides of the fence, as you said there. You've been on the product side, you've obviously been on that retail side. They are they're so far apart, I actually think sometimes that people don't realize, especially when it's done well, or if you're starting out, there's the fear there that you don't know how to cross from one side to the other. So in
Yeah.
that respect, then, what does buying look like for you? Or, if I'm coming to you, as you say, and I'm a startup brand, or I've had this amazing idea and I have this kind of initial set of products, maybe not even a full range yet, where am I starting?
So what I would suggest is to start with the wholesale conditions test. And what that is just three things. Which retailers are your target customers shopping at? What retailers are your competitors in? And what retailers align with your own brand DNA,
Love
your
this.
point of view? So just look at those three things. Once you have determined those three things, it's really important to think about your retail buyer when before you land them and also when you're already in a retailer as your partner. Because what you want is not only to get on that shelf, you want to stay there. So building that long-term relationship on trust and honesty, and of course, knowing that it's a win-win for that buyer. I think that's critical in the brand success, and that will help increase full price sales, which is what we all want.
And you've said a couple of things there that I have to put out. First of all, it isn't just about getting in, it's about staying on the shelf, but also the fact that good buyers want you to succeed. It's in their best interest that you sell really well, that you keep selling, and that you become, super profitable for them, but also that your brand becomes really well known and that shoppers come looking for it.
Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of brands have, I want to say, some fear or apprehension when they're, negotiating, right, with
Mm.
their retail buyer. I think that's a misconception that's quite common out there is that you can't negotiate, but of course you can. And I think we could dive into that a little bit later, but I know we want to talk about pricing and things like that, but I do want to bring up that, there's important aspects to selling into wholesale that will impact the retailer and it will allow you to scale. And I think that's really key.
And you know what? That's something that I think we see the bigger brands now, or maybe brands that have been around a while. They've made that look so easy, Lisa. I mean, you must see it all the time, but that has to be the holy grail that you do eventually go from having that first initial store to either growing through their portfolio if it's one retailer, or actually just getting bigger and bigger with the competition too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that, you and I have both seen is, a brand sells into a retailer, but then they haven't thought about what it means to stay on that shelf. Like, how do
Mm.
you think about merchandising? There's something that, my friend Neil says a lot, which is, it's great to get in that store, but if the merchandising strategy, like we've had brands spend so much time on building out a brand and that POV and the lookbook and like all the things you have to do, but then when it's in the store, it's just left and
Yeah.
it's not, you need to invest in the store experience too. So merchandising strategy is great, but merchandising execution closes that loop.
It always surprises me when brands haven't thought about how their product is going to hang or sit on a shelf or what's going to go alongside it or even, do you know what, the simple thing of getting the colleagues or the team involved, ensuring they know
Yes.
and understand the brand, they maybe know the history, they know the story, which of course you and I know, that's probably the most important thing to shoppers right now is giving them that emotional connection to a brand.
Yes. I think depending on, of course, the retailer, you want to delight your customer. You want
Mm,
them to come back. And the only way to do that is to make sure that they have not only a great customer experience, that they understand your brand and why it exists, but also increasing that footfall and getting them to come back and exciting them. I mean, that is. that's the holy grail of retail, right? Let's delight the customer with the right product at the right time in the right place and at the right price.
And talking of that almost dirty word, do you know what I mean? Because it's one that I cannot understand. You've gone to so much trouble, you've created a brand, you've got products ready. The amount of people I've met, and I'm sure you are the same, that
Yeah.
haven't truly worked out or thought about pricing.
Yes. And, we have a few tips for that, of course. I
Good.
think in terms of pricing, I think it's really important to have very clear visibility on what are your cost of goods sold. We call it COGS, right? So what is your first cost? What is your total cost? And then establishing your ideal markup. It should not be 50%. And I think a lot of brands will think, oh, I'll just double the price. No, it takes a lot more thought than that. So establishing your ITL markup to cover those costs and the markup to make a profit. And then also think about what is your retailer already selling, conducting market research and comp shopping similar products so you're not overpricing or underpricing because you don't want to devalue your price before if you haven't hit the market yet. So what are your customers willing to pay? And all of that is part of developing your pricing strategy. There's been a lot of talk of tariffs right now. So I think it's also important to understand if you are selling manufacturing first in a country that has a country of origin that's going to be impacted by tariffs or could be impacted by tariffs. I think these are things that we want to make sure we build into our cost so that we have that wiggle room. There's always going to be freight and duty, right? Some retailers prefer a landed cost, where some retailers prefer to buy FOB. These are things that you need to understand, not only from your own DTC brand perspective, but of course, from a retailer perspective. How do they want to buy from you?
There's so much in that, but I always think it's so worthwhile doing this work. I call it boring work. I call it boring work on purpose because you know what? Once you have these answers, you can go anywhere with it. But I am still shocked, and I'm sure you are, the amount of people that haven't thought of all those little things. And it's the culmination of, as you say, all the little costs. It's all the little might haves or could happens that you
Yeah.
have to factor in at this early stage.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's where it's important to also build that relationship with your retail buyer.
Mm.
Talk to them, ask them, what is your ideal markup? Because and I know this because I did the same thing as a retail buyer, I would walk a trade show like a Coterie or a Magic or even Project, and I would look at, okay, is it very clear what that brand's markup is? Because if
Mm.
that markup is 60%, you know what? That's half the battle for me. I'm definitely going to look at that brand. But if that brand has like a 50% markup, that's not really great for me as a retail buyer, right? I want to have that wiggle room also to pad like markdowns and promotions because if product is not moving, I might want to, build a promotion around it. These are things that you need to talk to your retail buyer about as well. How often they promote, how often are they marked down product. But I'd love to tell just a quick story where I worked with a brand and they were on this national retailers marketplace, which was great. And then that retailer said, I'd like to put you in the store. Where they had placed that brand was next to another brand that is always on sale. And that's going to devalue this new brand
Mm.
coming into the space. So I think it's really important for brands to also understand, okay, where are they being positioned in a store? And that's part of merchandising execution. We also talk about that in the book, how to do that, what to think about, what to consider.
It's great then that you're kind of giving the brand all these questions that they need to consider. And of course, if they don't have the
Yeah.
answers, to go and ask the retailer. Because then again, I think that gives the retailer confidence as well that they are being asked these questions, that the brand is curious, that they want to learn, but also, as you keep saying, they're building that relationship, which is amazing with them. So, and again, I hate to be negative, but I'd love to hear kind of the answer to the common mistakes that you see, to almost see how you turn it around. And again, I suppose to see realistically what brands are kind of worried about at the moment. So with that then, the common mistakes or issues that you see time and time again.
There are many.
Oh gosh.
But I will say, like, the first thing is negotiating. I think that brands don't negotiate enough with their retail buyers. So I would say negotiating is critical, understanding positioning, whether it's in a physical store or online, what category are you going to be under? Do they have specialty shops online that you can be part of if you're, let's say, formal accessories? And it really does depend on the category, but a lot of the questioning is the same. So negotiate, understand markdown strategy. The last thing you want to do is get on a retailer's shelf, and as soon as you get there, they're having a big sale. That's not where you want to be because that will devalue your brand, right? And you're training the customer to buy on sale, which is what you do not want. Having consistency across your own DTC storefront and what you're selling into the retailer. Consistency meaning branding, pricing, not necessarily product assortment, because I think you should be curating your product assortment to match what works with that retail buyer's.
That, and sorry to jump in there, that is incredibly important. You can't just sell everything you have to
No.
every single retailer. And I see so many brands get this wrong. They don't understand that, as you say, it's actually more special for the retailer if you can say, I've thought about this, I've thought about your customer. I'm curating my collection for
Yes.
your specific stores.
Yes. And we should always be evolving, right?
Mm.
Your product assortment should not remain stagnant unless it's, you're selling to, a transactional customer that's just looking at price or just looking for a particular product. For the most part, you want to have a merchandising strategy that is continually evolving. The customer evolves every single day. The retailer, the brand should do the same. In terms of capturing insights, what does the customer want to see from you? How can you make your product assortment better? Are you listening to the customer if they're giving you feedback? Are you looking at returns data? Are you looking at selling data? Are you talking to your brand ambassadors in the store? All of these things will help you evolve your product assortment. And what you sell to one retailer might not be right for another. Think about, and I always use this example because I think it's so good. Think about Calvin Klein, right? We look at Calvin Klein intimates. When you go on Amazon or you shop Costco, you find 3 packs, right? Because that Amazon or Costco customer likes to buy in bulk. They're very price sensitive, and they'll keep buying the same product all the time. So your product assortment can be super tight. It can be price driven. It can be in packs. You go into a department store, you
Mm.
see the Calvin Klein Intimates collection. If it's a luxury store, you'll see that the branding is a little bit different. It's more of a shop and shop. But if you go to a mainstream department store and you go look at Calvin Klein Intimates, you're going to see, a bigger range, maybe more of the lower and the mid-range price points. Again, curated for your customer's customer. And then you go into your own DTC store or specialty store, and it's much more curated. It's more elevated. So this tells us that Calvin Klein Intimates has curated their product assortment for their end customers' use.
It's a great example, and I think it just shows, and this goes back to something you've been saying, like we need to read the room here. You have to know
Yes.
and understand your customer, being the retailer, but also their customer. As much as you do for your own D2C customer, you have to do the homework here, as I always say. You have
Yes.
to look at the data and you have to listen to the customer.
Yes. Oh, yes. And I would say that to anyone, whether I am advising a retail executive or a DTC brand president, I would say the same thing, that you need to listen to your customer. Your customer is talking to you. They are giving you clues about what they want to see from you. And if you are not listening to them, you will not survive. And I think that's as clear cut as I can be, that there's going to be very clear winners and losers, especially this year, with everything that's happening in terms of supply chain and tariffs and uncertainty. We are going to see a lot more losers in retail, to put, I don't know how else to say it. I mean, if you're not working on being more focused on your customer, improving your supply chain, having a more efficient way of going to market, creating the right product at the right time, you may not win in retail.
And I think that's really honest of you as well, because again, you've seen this before over the years. You've worked with the brands where they have won, but also they haven't. And I think it doesn't matter where you are in the world right now, what side of the pond you're on,
Yeah.
whatever you're selling, these basics are all there in the book for good reason, that they're sound, kind of simple knowledge, but also things you got to go and find out. Like you have to do this homework. You can't just sell a product. But on that, and a more happy note, I suppose, leading in from what you've just said there, top tips then for any new and emerging brands out there.
So the first thing I was going to say is do your homework.
I love it. We'll keep banging that drum because
I
to both
know,
of
I
us,
know.
it's so important.
It is. And what does homework mean, right?
Mm.
It means comp shopping. It means
Oh,
finding product market fit. It means seeing what the best of the best brands are doing and what can you learn from them, which means branding, merchandising execution, developing a really great lookbook if that is who your retail buyer is and they're very aesthetically driven. Yes, you need to create a great lookbook. Make sure your website copy is really, really clear. So if a retail buyer comes to you and they're like, we want to buy this right now, your website copy can be used on the retailer's website. So that makes it really simple. Make it easy, simple to do business because today there is so much chaos. And if we can prepare and do our homework, I think that really goes a really, really long way.
I completely agree with you there. It isn't enough to have a good product. It isn't
No,
enough to have it look pretty on TikTok or Instagram. You have to do your home. Like none of these, and I think that's the worry nowadays, and you must have seen the change. A lot of these brands make it look so easy. They make it look like an overnight success. It is anything but right now.
it is absolutely not. And a lot of the bigger brands are, they're worried about the same things that the
Mm,
smaller emerging brands are worried about, right? And what I love about the book, not only that it has these actionable things that literally you can do immediately, but really clear about why it's important to have that product market fit. I think there's not only great tidbits here, but these are things that the bigger brands are also doing, right? I worked at Ralph Lauren. I was head of buying for UK, Ireland as well, by the way, and Scandinavia. And what I will tell you is that I would buy that product for the retailer. So it's almost like I was the wholesale brand, right? But I was the buyer of the brand. So it's a little bit different, but the concepts are the same, where I would need to understand what does that particular retailer want? What is their customer buying? My customer for Ralph Lauren in Scandinavia was very different from my
mm.
customer in London and very different to, Toronto or New York. So finding that nuance between your different regions and the customers in those regions, these are all things that we need to consider no matter what size of branding we are, no matter if we're a DTC brand or a multi-brand retailer.
And I also love on that this is sound advice. And he said this right at the beginning. And I hadn't thought of it that way. That actually, if you're an independent, if you're a small retailer, the same can be said here that
Yeah.
really to utilize your book to look at things maybe with a different perspective, think outside the box here. Think about the brands you have, negotiate with them as well. I think a lot of this works both ways, which is fantastic
Yes.
because it's really bringing what's in your head from sitting both sides of the fence and bringing it out there to everyone to utilize.
Definitely. Thinking about merchandising execution, product knowledge, getting the brands, if you're a retailer or a store owner, getting them to come and do product knowledge for you. That should be part of the deal anyway, right? Store visits, spend time in your stores. I mean, it's very clear when you go comp shopping what retail leaders are going into their stores and who are not. And you and I know this, right? And then monitor cross-channel performance and give that information to your retail buyer or get your brand to understand what's happening across channel because that means there could be opportunity that we could take advantage of. And if we're not all talking, we can't all win.
I completely agree. And again, it's this idea of building a relationship. The buyer is your friend. I don't know where, kind of along the way over the last 10, 20 years that there's this fear that it's them and us. Again, everyone's working for the same reason. Everyone wants that shopper to turn into a customer, to buy, to come back, have longevity, which is something everyone wants to build that loyalty as we go forward. So, look, and we could talk all day about this book
We
because I'm
could.
so passionate, just like you are. And I just think you've done such a gorgeous job of bringing your knowledge to paper to share with everyone. But look, final question. What's next? What's coming up over the next few months?
Well, exciting to announce that we have two more books on the way, actually. We have another one that's similar to the wholesale, which is a guide, but it's on process innovation. So, with our newsletter, The Merchant Life, we have a lot of process guidelines, like how can you create better product? How do you build an assortment? All the way to, how do we look at material innovation and product development? So, we cover a lot. And so what we did was we took all of that and then put it into, a 40-page guide, and it's process innovation. So that should be out in the next maybe month or two. So pretty soon.
Fantastic.
And then we're working on a bigger commercially published book, and that is it's on product creation, process improvement in product creation, so innovation. As well, we're talking about materials. So it's very materials specific. Materials are fabric, trims, color, print. That's all materials. So that's what's next. And then I'll be at the Lead in New York. Very excited for the Lead. They're a great partner of mine. That is end of May. So super excited.
Busy, busy, busy. And
Okay.
as you've mentioned, and I'm a great fan of reading The Merchant Life, your newsletter. So obviously sign up on the website. I'll pop a link as well into the show notes because it's just gold dust. It's magic the amount of information you give away. And I'm sure then you'll be letting us all know when those new releases are coming out as well.
Absolutely. Do a preview.
Oh, you heard it here first. I do love an old book, as Lisa knows, so I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much. But if
Thanks,
you
Melissa.
have enjoyed today's episode, please do share it. And I think this is such an important one. Whether you're a retailer, whether you're a brand, share this out there with your own network because it is so packed full of information, as you've heard. Obviously, follow us on your favorite podcast platform. And of course, while you're there, just make sure you do hit that follow button. You don't just listen and walk away, that you do follow for lots more information. Watch us over on YouTube, of course, and subscribe to the Retail Advisor. You have no idea how useful that is if you do that for us. And of course, if you're sharing any of this on social media, tag me, Melissa Moore, tag Lisa Amlani, and of course, tag the Retail Tea Break podcast. Connect with myself and Lisa on LinkedIn, and of course, go and buy the book. Of course, I'm going to put that link in the show notes. It is fantastic. I can definitely vouch for that at this stage. Lisa, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for sharing so much knowledge. And thank you so much for being on today's episode.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for having me.